Welcome to Campfire Academy. I'm Andrew Craissati. Today, we're talking about crafting a memorable message and staying top of mind with investors.
Why is it important that your message is remembered and not just heard or understood?
When you're creating a message for your investor community or even for your internal community of employees, that message needs to be remembered. It's not enough just to say, they heard it or they understood it. You need that information to stay in their brain and be foremost at the top of their mind. In my earlier part of my career, I trained originally as a financier, and I would work a lot on initial public offerings of companies going public and issuing their securities to investors. And we used to do these so-called roadshows where for 2 weeks we would go and present a company to a long list of investors. And we would do this 5, 6, 7 times a day for 2 weeks. Now, if you put yourself in the shoes of that investor, maybe they're taking 5, 7 meetings a day. And at the end of the day, not only have they not had the chance to read any documents, but they have also now become mentally completely blurred with all of the events of the day. And they head home. If you think about it at a human level, they head home at the end of the day, they go home to their wife, they take the dog for a walk, they say goodnight to the kids, and then they sit with their wives or their husbands and have dinner and do whatever they do to relax over the rest of that evening. If they have had a good encounter with our client during the day, they will talk to their wife about what they experienced that day. They will have remembered it. And if not, it's already gone. Now, fast forward to the end of the month, they've now had 200 meetings during the month, and they've got to try and figure out where you were within those 200 meetings. And they've got to try and have some element of recollection about their experience with you. So financial information and the nuance or context of your company's story has to be something that is memorable. Because if it isn't memorable, by definition, it is gone. And it will be gone very possibly by the end of the very same day. So you have to figure out, from a curation perspective, what is that message to start off with? Then you have to figure out, how did they get to experience it as your audience in a way that doesn't interfere with the leading of their normal business day? And then thirdly, how is that recollection? Why do they recall it later? And what have you done that has enabled them to recall the story that you've crafted? So the memory aspect of getting information across is so critical, and it really is almost your number one priority.
What would you say makes for a memorable message?
When you think about the message that needs to come across and making it a memorable message, the obvious question is, okay, how do I make it memorable? So a message that delivers impact, which is another way effectively of saying memorable, is that you bring it to life in the mind of the audience. You make it relevant to them. I remember vividly going back to the days of being a financier and sitting in front of large numbers of investors repetitively day after day. We used to use tricks that would allow the investor to then keep you foremost in their mind. One memory that I have is that we would, if our client had a product, we would physically bring the product in the room. We would put the product in the hands of the investor, literally having them hold it, play with it. If it was software, we would have them sit at a computer with a keyboard, actually play with the software on the computer, and that interaction allowed them to recall the software later. I remember very vividly having a fascinating client years ago that was the world leader in 3D technology, particularly for film and television industries. And at considerable expense and challenge, we would wheel a 3D television set into the office of each investor that we met, and we would play 3D content for them on a television set in their office. And you can bet your bottom dollar that when they went home that night and they saw their partner, the first thing they talked about was, "You will never believe what I saw today." So a memorable message is something that first and foremost is easy to recall for the audience, and it is highly impactful. I happen to believe that one of the first ingredients that goes into it is credibility. So if you have a career or you have a background where you've worked for a famous organization, where you have done something that is of interest to your audience, emphasize that, get that point across if it is relevant to what you're talking about. But a memorable message is a message that is impactful, and it is conveyed with a sense of integrity.
As a bit of a follow-up to that, how does storytelling function as a means to make messages more memorable?
So as we think about a memorable message, don't forget the importance of the fact that you're telling a story. Storytelling is what lies at the heart of effective communications. Storytelling goes back thousands of years. The Bible is nothing more than storytelling. It's a very important form of storytelling for every Christian around the world. But it is storytelling, as is history. The ability to sit around the fire and share stories is what binds us together as human beings. That is the reason why Audi's product is called Campfire, right? It is the most important part of camping, is you sit around the fire at the end of the day and you tell stories. And I first witnessed it in the setting of military veterans going on retreats and being together and being amongst themselves and sitting around a fireplace. And you could see that lifelong bonds were being developed around the fireplace through storytelling. Storytelling is a way of making a story stick in your memory. It is also a way for you to hold the attention of your audience for however long you have in their presence. So you are storytelling. Everything that you tell is or should be structured to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There is an arc to everything that comes from you that is narratively building a memorable and impactful story.
Why does audio help messages stick in a way that written or visual channels often don't?
Let's talk about the messaging a little bit more and the role of audio in the delivering of that message. What is it about audio that helps a message really stick, particularly when you compare it with the written word or a video by comparison, or a newsletter by comparison? In our company, we regularly have discussions with our clients where they ask us for our input on the difference between the impact that is created by a newsletter, a video webinar, a YouTube video, or a Campfire delivered piece of audio. And it actually goes back to a really interesting scientific piece of research that took place in the 1980s when one of the world leaders, I think it was Dolby, did a piece of work to study if you put people in the cinema and you had them watch a beautifully filmed movie with terrible audio quality, and then you ask that same audience to watch a really poorly filmed piece of visual content with very high quality audio, and they were then asked to compare the two experiences. The high quality audio won every single time. And it was because our ears are much more sensitive in how they feed our brain when compared to our eyes. So we are, as animals, more attuned to the consumption of audio content as opposed to visual content. The other thing that's very important to understand is that audio, by its very nature, allows us to multitask. With a visual experience, no matter what form of visual medium it is, we are required to stare at a screen, pay attention to what we're looking at. And in today's world, where we're all leading busy lives, the notion of multitasking on a Saturday morning, going to the gym, jogging round the lake, walking the dog, driving the car to go away for the long weekend, these are all moments where we can become well informed by listening to content while we are doing something else. In our organization, we see it empirically, where a video is typically holding the attention of an audience for up to 120 seconds. Our clients' audio content is statistically holding their engagement for 25 to 28 minutes per piece of content. That 12 to 14 times multiple is for a reason, and it is the impact that is delivered by audio.
How can investor relations teams decide when an update is better suited for audio versus email or video?
We've discussed why it's important to be remembered. We've discussed how to make it memorable as a piece of content. And we've also discussed what it is about audio that helps deliver the message. So that doesn't eliminate the role of video. It doesn't eliminate the need for an email-delivered newsletter, for example. It also doesn't eliminate what is required by statute or by the regulatory framework around which stock exchanges and financial marketplaces actually operate. So first and foremost, you still have to comply with what is required of you from a statutory perspective as a public company or a quoted fund. So an RNS feed, for example, in the United Kingdom, is something that you're not going to walk away from and replace it with audio. That will remain. Audio is going to work well for you when you have something complex that you need to discuss, when you have multiple stories to tell and you want the luxury of time. It doesn't necessarily give you an advantage if all you're doing is a quick 5-minute update. With a 5-minute update, that could perhaps be a more flexible choice by you as to which medium you want to use. But if you need time and you need the audience to concentrate, or you're building context, then audio will be the highest performing medium for you.
How can teams introduce audio without adding noise or overloading their communications cadence?
When you think about audio delivered messaging that is memorable and impactful, you're obviously taking into account how much information are we already pushing towards our investors and shareholders and towards the market. And you want to be making a key decision on the notion of, are you creating too much content? Are you pushing out too many different forms of stories in different formats, and they're becoming duplicative? Well, the first thing is your use of audio needs to be supplemental to what is required of you by statute or by the market. So just simply being repetitive does not serve any benefit to your investor community. It is really, as a supplemental tool, it gives you the ability to introduce more information, to enrich the narrative that you have already crafted with your traditional formats. So building context, building more of the nuance around the points that you're trying to emphasize. This is where it becomes really valuable. You also want to ensure that your use of audio has a cadence to it, that there is a regularity to it. So if, for example, you decide that you want to do a monthly episode of 20 minutes duration and in which you're building out stories that aren't in your financial results each quarter, then that's very clear that it's supplemental. And how you distribute that content, where it is available on your IR page on your website, through traditional podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify, making those decisions using Campfire as a high analytics tool set that allows you to measure what your audience is doing. Those are the decisions that you're going to need to make. But if you are intelligent in how you differentiate between your use of Campfire and audio versus all your other output, then you're enhancing the experience, not complicating the experience.
Can you share an example or a story of where shifting from text or video to audio improved engagement and recall, or any instances where shifting format changed engagement results?
So let's bring all of this to life. Let's think about real-world examples where the use of audio is transformative for a client of ours. So we have a client that is financial services client. It's an insurance conglomerate. And they had a community that they wanted to talk to, and they were creating a video-based webinar once a month. And they were very frustrated by the attendance rate. Nobody was showing up for the video content. And when they kept it live for another 30 days so people could later consume it, they were also very disappointed by the attendance rate for the non-live video content. And they therefore made a decision, actually without our involvement, that they wanted to move over to audio. They had already convinced themselves that audio was perhaps a more appropriate medium and allowed for the luxury of more flexibility, multitasking, the ability to not have to look at a screen when consuming the content. And they worked with Campfire, and they've now been a Campfire user for about 3 years. In those 3 years, they made it very clear to us that the key KPI that they wanted to look at in working with us was the size of the audience and the growth in the size of the audience. Well, in their particular case, we have grown their audience 560% over the course of those 3 years. And perhaps more impressively is the fact that over those 36 months, their audience grew every month except for 1 month. And I think I'm right in saying it was about a 95% growth in terms of the number of months where there was growth. And it was averaging between 8 and 9% month on month audience growth. So they are today really pleased both with the way their audience has developed in size, but they've also seen a dramatic uplift in the interactivity with the audience. So the feedback, the messaging they get from their community, and also the number of minutes that the audience is devoting to consuming the content, which in their case averages 24 minutes per piece of content.
And lastly, what should listeners be asking themselves as they put some of these insights here into practice?
So the role of audio is a very powerful role in supporting investor relations, internal communications, and the ability of a leadership of an organization to communicate, whether that is internal or external. To think about adopting audio, there are really two significant issues that you need to be asking yourself. One is, do I understand what my objective is in creating that content? So how do I align the outcomes of an audio strategy with my overall business objective? And secondly, is the content itself well aligned with an audio experience? There are some forms of content that need to be visual. There are some forms of contents that require the written word. So is this well suited to audio? Is it complex? Does it need a lot of explanation? Does it need a discussion about the nuance? And therefore, is audio in this particular case additive to the other channels that I'm already using? If you think about those two questions and rhetorically put them to yourselves, you will then be making a smart decision about the use of Campfire and audio as a way of communicating. This has been Campfire Academy, an Audi production. To learn more about how you can capture investor attention and stay top of mind, visit audi.com.